Last but not least, we have Head of Division Ki-Hwan of Korea Ocean Business Corporation, or KOBC. And he's currently the head of the management support team at HMM, of which Korean Ocean Business Corporate is the majority shareholder. Please welcome him with a big round of applause. Good morning, everyone. I'm with KOBC. My name is Ki-Hwan.
오늘 말씀드릴
The topic of my presentation, well, we'll listen to the previous presentations from the perspective of banks, challenges of ship finance, and ESG. Well, these were great messages, and I'd like to look at more particular issue of a tax lease. And when it comes to ship finance and how it is stagnant at the moment, I'd like to talk about how we can break through this situation with a Korean tax lease scheme. The table of contents. First, I'm going to look at the global and Korean market trends of ship finance. And I'm going to talk about the needs for a new source of ship finance scheme in Korea, followed by a proposed Korean tax lease model. And I will conclude my presentation with closing remarks. First, about the global ship finance market and the recent trend and what we can learn from the trend. As you can see from the graph on the left-hand side, you can see that the global top 40 banks of ship finance, for the last 7 to 8 years, you can see that size reduced. In 2015, it peaked, and ever since you see that it kept decreasing, and currently it's stagnant. Well, there can be many reasons behind this trend, but Basel III regulation can be one of that. And excessive RWA, and many banks reduce exposure due to risks and credit quality. Well, there are many factors that led to the reduced ship finance. And regarding the funding gap, we looked at this issue as well, and we can say that there are many factors that are playing. And I'm going to briefly touch upon the case of Korea later on. And on the right-hand side, as you can see from the case of China, this shows the ship finance of Chinese lease companies, including Minsheng and ICBC, the Bank of Communications. These institutions are leading the growth of ship finance. And as a result, we're seeing the growth of Chinese fleet. Next, the Korean market. I already told you that the market is stagnant. Well, even though this is not the latest data, well, the red bars on the left-hand side show public players in ship finance, and the blue ones represent the private parties. You can see that the private parties, you see the numbers for private parties keeps decreasing. Since the bankruptcy of Hanjin Shipping in 2016, many commercial banks are leaving the ship financing market, and they're either leaving or reducing ship financing. And including my organization, KOBC and KAGSIM, well, these are filling in the gaps where the private parties left, but we're seeing this deepening trend. And looking at the right-hand side, as you can see from the tables, this is from the Smart Shipping Information Center. And out of 948 domestic shipping companies, this is about 15 billion outstanding, and you can see how public and private is taking up the portion. The public takes up 62.5%, whereas the private takes up only 8.1%. And the fund on the third row is actually the public. So what this table shows is that the private is playing a very trivial role, and its role is decreasing in line with the global trend. So we have to think about revitalize the Korean ship finance market. And for that, we need to think about how we can attract the private players into the market. Next one. This is a global ship supply trend, or the order book. In 2007, the BDI index reached a peak at that time. And the order book reached its peak as well. And since that time, we see the figures kept falling. But when it comes to eco-friendly ships and ESG vessels, we believe that we'll see more demand for these vessels. And it really depends on how we can meet these demands for different types of vessels. And that is one of the major challenges for the Korean market as well. And in East Asia, in shipping industries, Korea, China, and Japan are engaged in severe competition. So I'm going to look at the comparison of shipping in these countries. So regarding the size of the tonnage fleet, actually the tonnage of fleet is increasing. And in the case of China and Japan, and especially I mentioned that Chinese lease companies are very active, and they're growing their fleet across the world. But in the case of the blue dots or lines, which represent Korea, well, you can see that the size of fleet for Korea has been stagnant for the last 7 to 8 years. And on the right-hand side, this shows the average age of vessels. And the lowest red line is Japan, which is 7 years. It's quite low. That means that they keep having new vessels. But in the case of China, the average age is high, but it dropped drastically. And for Korea, which is represented by blue, it is stagnant and it is in line with the global average. So it would be very helpful to have competitive average age of vessels. Just like I mentioned before, considering all the trends we looked at already, we can come up with the reasons why we need new schemes of ship finance in Korea. First, government policy goals. We have the 2030 shipping industry strategy goal at the government level. Well, I'm going to go into detail, but anyway, when it comes to this ship industry strategy goal, ship finance is going to play a very big part in securing this goal. Second, from the presentation that we looked at earlier, we already looked at the needs for decarbonization and how we can be environmentally friendly. So there will be growing demand for eco ships. In order to meet the needs or meet the demands, we will need more fleet and more investment from the private. And the third reason is about the global market competitiveness. Utilizing various shipping finance tools, we can cut costs, as we saw from the cases of many other shipping companies around the world. But in Korea, we're seeing high costs for ship financing. That will mean that we have less competitiveness compared to these shipping companies, global companies. So in order to revitalize ship finance, what's more vital is to attract the private sector and the commercial banks, especially these commercial players who left the ship finance market due to underperformance and high costs. So attracting financial investors back to the market will be the focus of our ship finance strategy.
In general, there can be a number of new structures for ship finance, but I'd like to propose what is already in place in the UK, France, and Japan. Tax lease scheme. I think it is a good idea to adopt here in Korea. In general, ship financing would involve a comprehensive taxation to save the corporate tax and deferring corporate tax payment for the lessees, so that the ship company and the investors can both win. So for details, I would like to elaborate later on with a Korean model. In general, for ship finance, the structure resembles what you see on the left-hand side. Any income in excess of the expense would be the net profit that ship finance would pursue. This is in terms of economic and accounting. This is a very general profit-making structure. And on the right-hand side, you see the tax lease structure, where accelerated depreciation will incur a large loss in the initial stage, but this net loss can incur tax benefit. But a large depreciation would be returned to a large tax benefit, and depending on how you control this would determine the overall structure. As I mentioned before, the most notable tax lease type of structure used widely right now is the tax and Japan model, the FTL and JALCO models. But what I would like to present are actually quite popular, and we would like to take the structure of tax lease structure that is already in use. So adopted in 2007, and after one revision, the FTL model has been in place up until today. With a single investor model, a very strong investor is attracted into the market, and at the same time, as a lender, they also participate to make the structure quite robust. Tax saving or tax benefit through the gains on transfer tax could lead to about 12 to 15% of saving in the ship price. On the other hand, Japan's JALCO has undergone many changes since over the past years, and in 1999 it came to the current structure of operating lease. And so this structure has been in place ever since. And unlike the French system, JALCO's system is mainly focuses on the investor. And what the shipping companies can save is not as large as FTL, because for the gain on transfer transaction, France gives benefit, but Japan provides tax benefits to SMEs for investing. And so there is a different benefit offered from the JOCO system than the FTL system, but in fact, there's more benefit given to the investor. So under the Japanese system, the timing when you save the tax, time value for money is the main focus of this total system. So overall, about 5% of the ship price can be saved. So in general, the system mainly focuses on the investors. So based on the two models, French model and the Japanese model, will be the basis for a Korean tax lease structure that I am about to propose. At KOBC, for a long period of time, we have looked into a possible model for Korea. And we are actually in talks with the government. Exactly when this model will be adopted into legislation is unknown, but we will continue on our research. The basic structure is this. From accounting-wise, the depreciation method would be is generally used a 20-year strict line. But in terms of taxation for accelerated depreciation, declining balance method will be used, and useful life will be 10 years instead of the generally used 20 years, so that the initial tax loss, will be incurred at large scale. Under this structure, the annual depreciation would be 25.9%, which is quite sizable. And in that case, the initial loss will be transferred to the investor, and through consolidated gross income taxation, the taxable income will be reduced, and that's how tax benefit can be provided. But following the FTL model, after tax benefit is deposited, when the shipping company later on exercises the option to purchase the ship, they can use this deposit to reduce the ship price. And so the investor and shipping company can both win. So we are more geared towards the French model. For specifics, this is the example of a Korean tax lease model that we're proposing. On the left-hand side, you see the investor. In the French tax model, this would be the equivalent of the single investor, the parent of the lessor. And because the taxable income is so high, investor carries a large burden to pay the corporate tax. In the middle, you see the SPC, which would be the lessor. And then in Korea, most of the ships, when a new build order goes out for tax benefits, flag of convenience is often used with tax havens. So the actual order will be placed by setting up an overseas SPC, and that overseas SPC would be the statutory owner of the ship, making the order for the new build. And this overseas SPC as regards the 100% subsidiary of the investor, the domestic SPC will have an installment type sale. So 99% of the amount at initiation will be transferred, and the remaining 1% at the end of BBC contract will be deferred, so that the legal ownership will be will be taken up by the foreign SPC, but in effect, the actual owner will be the domestic SPC. The domestic SPC, taking use of the high quality of credit rating of investor, will help finance the loan at an affordable cost. And so the domestic SPC will be the lessor accounting-wise. The lessee would be, of course, the Korean shipping companies through the BBC contract. The biggest feature of the FTL model is the tax saving effect. And you see on the bottom left, tax deposit. A part of that saved tax will be deposited. And then the domestic SPC's loan, when the shipping company actually purchases the ship, this tax deposit will be used to pay back the debt. So when the lessor takes up the ship price will be saved. Last but not least, in the FTL model, from the domestic SPC, ship is transferred to the shipping company, and I think this transfer may take place in about 7 years' time. And at the time of the transfer, the shipping company will have the option to exercise the purchasing, and then the massive tax loss that was incurred in the initial stage will become ultimately a benefit, so that and this may actually end up placing a burden on the ship company when they purchase the ship. And so the transfer gain is allowed under the FTL model, but currently with the government providing additional tax benefit really will be needed, and that is what we appeal to the government many times. What we are thinking is 100% equity of domestic SPC is owned by the investors. So the equity of the investors should go to the shipping company, and then the charterer and domestic SPC should merge and together own a ship. So that's the adjustment we are making to this model, and this is under research. If that is the case, by merging with the domestic SPC, the charterer will be owning the ship, and the shipping company will then be able to save the tax. So let me summarize what I have been presenting. I have mentioned the challenges in the ship financing market, and we need a number of tools to overcome those challenges. And one such tool would be a Korean tax lease scheme. I described why this is needed and what kind of specific structure we are envisioning. And if this scheme is written into law in Korea, then the ship company and banks who hesitate to make the investment, the lenders, and then in Korea, ship funds are rarely used, but this form of large investors who are under the burden of a massive corporate tax can come together. The shipping company, lender, investors can all win. And according to our simulation, 8,000 DWT ship was simulated in our model, and we found that about 19 billion won of tax saving was possible. And if this can be used to save ship finance, then per ship about 9 billion won could be saved in ship price, just like the FTL model, and a tax benefit. So We will continue to collect the opinions of all stakeholders, and KOBC will continue to work hard so that a tax lease model can be adopted in Korea, and for private investors and lenders can enter this ship finance market once again to revitalize ship financing in Korea. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah.
Thank you. The concept of tax lease might not be something that is very easy to understand. It's rather new, but this is utilized in France and Japan. Thank you very much for your presentation. Let's give him a big hand for his great presentation, and thank you very much. Thank you to 3 presenters. Before we have a panel discussion, we need a few minutes, so why don't we take a short break for 5 minutes? Thank you.
네, 저희 좌장님께서 말씀.
As the moderator has mentioned, we have listened to 3 presentations, and after we prepare the stage, we will continue on with our panel discussion.